Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Before I begin, I'd like to offer a simple reminder. I'm not above making mistakes. I always encourage you to study and test everything for yourself. With that out of the way, let's dive in. This week, our Torah portion is Bamidbar, which can be translated as in the wilderness, and can be found in Numbers 1:1 through 4:20. Our Haftarah portion for this week is 1 Samuel 20:18 through 42. Our Brit Chadasha portion is Matthew 24:29 through 36. And our psalm is Psalms 122. As we turn into these readings, something stands out immediately. The Torah does not begin this book with a command, a miracle, or even a dramatic moment. It begins with a place, a setting, a location that is more than geography. Adonai spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, Numbers 1:1. That phrase, in the wilderness, becomes a doorway into everything we explore today. Our Haftarah shows David and Jonathan navigating uncertainty. Our Brit Chadasha speaks of cosmic shaking before redemption. Our psalm expresses longing for the house of Adonai, even while still on a journey. Each reading in its own way echoes the same truth. God formed his people in the in-between places. And as we open the book of Bamidbar, we are stepping into the very environment that God shapes identity, establishes order, and prepares his people for what comes next. Bamidbar opens with a detail so simple we might overlook it, but the Torah never wastes words. Adonai spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. The Hebrew name for this book is Bamidbar, in the wilderness, not after Sinai, not before the journey, not on the way to the promised land, in the wilderness. The wilderness is not a backdrop. It's a setting God chooses for revelation, formation, and identity. Rashi teaches that the wilderness is a place of hakefer, ownerlessness, a place where nothing competes for your allegiance, a place where God can speak without rival voices. Rambam adds that the wilderness is where Israel became a people, not in Egypt where they were slaves, not in Canaan where they will be settled, but here in the in-between. Midrash even goes further. The Torah was given in the wilderness because it belongs to no one, so that all may receive it. In other words, the wilderness is a place where God levels the ground, where he strips away the illusion of self-sufficiency, where he forms a people who can receive his word. This is why Bamidbar begins here, not by accident, not by a narrative convenience, but because formation requires wilderness. Identity is clarified in the wilderness. Israel has left Egypt, but Egypt has not left Israel. They were free, but they were not yet formed, redeemed, but not yet rooted, delivered, but not yet defined. And so God brings them to a place where all identities fall away. No taskmasters, no idols, no cities, no familiar rhythm, no distractions, just God, just his presence, just his voice. Hosea captures this beautifully. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, bringing her into the wilderness and speaking tenderly to her heart. Hosea 2:14. The wilderness is where God speaks tenderly, where he restores identity, where he says, you are my people. And if we needed proof that identity is still fragile at this point in Israel's story, we only need to remember the golden calf. Israel has seen the plagues, crossed the sea, eaten manna, and heard the voice of God at Sinai. Still, when Moses delays, their heart reaches back to the familiarity of Egypt. How many times do we do that in our own lives? The wilderness exposed what was still inside of them, not to shame them, but to heal them. The wilderness revealed the fracture of our identity, so God can restore them. It shows us the place where Egypt still clings to us, so that God can remove it. This is not only Israel's story, it's ours. Every one of us knows what it's like to walk through seasons where old identities no longer fit, and new ones have yet formed. Seasons where God is stripping away and enslaving us so that he can reveal who we truly are. Order is established in the wilderness. Before Israel moves, God organizes them. Before they march, he arranges them. Before the journey, he gives them structure. This is not control, it's compassion. The wilderness is chaotic. The wilderness is unpredictable. The wilderness is vulnerable. And so God brings order. He arranges the tribes around the Mishkan, the tabernacle. He assigns roles. He establishes boundaries. He creates a rhythm of holiness. Psalms 122 echoes this longing for divine order. Our feet are standing within your gates, Jerusalem. Psalms 122:2. Even while journeying, the psalmist, seeing the beauty of God's ordered house, the wilderness is where that order begins. Calling is revealed in the wilderness. It's not here. It's not in Egypt. It's here. It's not in Egypt. It's not in Canaan. And the Levites receive their calling. It's here that the priests begin their service. It is here that the tribe learns their roles. The Mishnah teaches that 25 years of age, the priest entered training, and at 30, he began his service. Mishnah Tamid 1:1. The calling is not discovered in comfort. It's revealed in the wilderness. But why? Because the wilderness strips away noise. The wilderness removes false identity. The wilderness exposes the heart. The wilderness reveals what God has placed within you. Our own wilderness seasons. Our community has known something about wilderness seasons. Seasons of transition, rebuilding, rediscovering identity, and learning to walk again. And yet, in our Brit Chadasha portion, gives us a powerful image. Now, learn from the parable of the fig tree, Matthew 24:32. Before we go further, we need to pause and clarify something important. There's two different fig tree moments in the gospel, and they serve two very different purposes. In Mark 11 and Matthew 21, Yeshua approaches the fig tree that has leaves on it, but no fruit, a warning against appearing righteousness without actually bearing the fruits of the Ruach or the Spirit. That is where we learn that our lives should show real fruit, the kind that others see and experience. But in Matthew 24, our portion for today, Yeshua is not inspecting fruits. He is teaching a parable about seasons. When the branch becomes tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. This is not judgment, this is hope. It's a promise that after the wilderness, after the stripping, after the formation, fruitfulness is coming. The tender branches and the new leaves are the early sign that God is preparing something in us. So yes, the scripture teaches us that we are meant to bear fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. But in Matthew 24, it's not about the fruit inspection. It's about recognizing the early signs of life that God brings forth in us. It's about seeing the tender branches and knowing that God is preparing us for a season of fruitfulness after the wilderness. And this is why Bamidbar begins where it does. Before God counts his people, before he assigns roles, before he arranges the camp, he forms us. The wilderness is not an end. It's a preparation for fruitfulness. And now that God has formed his people, he begins to count them. Bamidbar moves from the wilderness setting straight into something that feels, at first glance, dry, administrative, a census. But in Torah, nothing is merely administrative. Nothing is a filler. Nothing is wasted. When God counts his people, it's never about numbers. It's about names, identity, and belonging. The portion begins, take a census of all the congregation of Bnei Israel, by their clans, by their ancestral homes, counting the names of every male, head by head. Numbers 1-2. This is not a mass head count. This is not a spreadsheet. This is not a statistic. This is God calling each person by name. The Hebrew phrase, Bamidbar Shemot, literally means by the number of names. Not by the number of bodies, but not by the number of soldiers, but the number of names. Because in the wilderness, identity is fragile. And God begins by saying, I see you. I know you. You belong. The census is organized with precision, by tribe, by clan, by ancestral home, by name, and by role. This is where God is saying, you are not lost in the crowd. You are part of a people. In Egypt, Israel was counted as slaves, but in Bamidbar, Israel is counted as sons. In Egypt, they were counted for labor, but in Bamidbar, they are counted for a purpose. In Egypt, they were counted as property, but in Bamidbar, they are counted as beloved. This is why the census matters. It's not about quantity, it's about identity. To understand the beauty of Bamidbar's census, we must contrast it with another census, the one that David ordered in 2 Samuel 24. David's census was not commanded by God. It was driven by pride, fear, and self-reliance. It was about strength, not service. It was about control, not care. And what was the result? And the result was judgment. Why? Because David's census said, "Look at what I have built." But Bamidbar's census said, "Look at who belongs to me." David's census was about power. God's census was about his people. David's census was about ego. God's census was about identity. David's census was about military might. God's census is about covenantal belonging. In the census in Bamidbar, there are three purposes. One, belonging. Every person is named. Every tribe is recognized. Every family is honored. Identity. The census revealed who Israel is becoming, a people with structure, order, and a calling. 3, readiness. The census prepared Israel for a journey ahead, not physically, but spiritually. This is why the census is done after the wilderness formation. God forms identity first, then he counts. One of the most fascinating and often overlooked details in this portion is Israel is counted at 20 years old and up. Why? Everyone goes out into the army of Israel, number 1-3. The 20 years of age is the military readiness. The census is about who will be defending the nation. But the Levites are counted from 1 month old. Why? Because their calling is not war. It's an inheritance, service, and protection. The Levites are counted from infancy because God is their inheritance. Their role is sacred. Their identity is different. Their calling is lifelong. The Mishnah reinforces this distinction. At 25 years of age, the priest entered training, and at 30, they began his service. The Levites are not warriors for the nation. They are guardians of holiness. They protect the sacred. They carry the presence. They stand between the people and the danger of holy. This is why they are counted differently. Their calling is different. Their identity is different. Their purpose is different. And so the census is not just about a list of numbers. It's a dedication of identity. Before Israel march, before they encamp, before they serve, before they worship, God names them, God counts them, and God claims them. Now that the people have been counted, we move into the next movement of this portion, each man under his own standard. After God counts his people by name, the Torah moves into one of the most visually striking and spiritually rich images of all of Bamidbar. The children of Israel shall camp, each man by his own standard. With the banner of their ancestral homes, they shall camp around the tent of meeting at a distance. Numbers 2:2. The single verse opens a world of meeting. The Hebrew word for standard is Degalim, a banner, a flag, a symbol of identity. Every tribe has its own color, symbol, heritage, and halakhic flavor, and its own derech, its own standard, its own way of working out the covenant. Now, when the Torah says each man under his own standard, it does not mean each person invents their own truth or their own commandments. This is not Judges 21:25. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. All of Israel lived underneath the same Torah. The standards reflect distinctiveness, not contradictions. Diversity of expression, not diversion of covenant. Every tribe worked out the same commandments, but with its own gifts, emphasis, and family's ways. Standards equals identity. Standards equal heritage. Standards, halakhic distinctiveness. Standards equal family ways. This is not uniformity, this is diversity within the covenant. The Torah says that each man under his own standard, not someone else's standard, not someone else's identity, not someone else's halakha, your own. The Jewish tradition teaches that each tribal banner carried a symbol connected with Jacob's blessings in Genesis 49 and Moses' blessings in Deuteronomy 33, as well as the color of the breastplate of the high priest. Judah banner bore a lion, Issachar's a donkey, Zebulun a ship, Dan an eagle or a serpent, Ephraim an ox, Benjamin a wolf. These weren't mascots, they were identity markers, reminders of the calling, destiny, and heritage. Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah says that the standards were beloved by Israel, for they showed each tribe its place. In other words, the standards gave Israel a sense of belonging. You don't have to wonder where you would fit. You don't have to guess where you belong. You don't have to fight for your place. Your standard told you, this is your people, this is your calling, this is your home. Each tribe had its own standard, its own halakhic emphasis, its own way of living out Torah. Judah emphasizes leadership and justice. Levi emphasizes holiness and service. Issachar emphasized Torah study. Zebulun emphasized generosity and provision. Dan emphasized protection and judgment. Naphtali emphasized blessing and swiftness. These weren't contradictions. They were distinctive. Just as today, some families emphasize on hospitality, some on the emphasis of study, some on prayer, some on service, and some on generosity. This is not division. This is diversity within covenantal faithfulness. The closer the tribes drew to the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the more their halakha converged. As the tribes or the people drew close to the Mishkan, their halakha converged. This is one of the most beautiful truths in the entire book of Bamidbar. Further out, there was more diversity. Closer in, more unity. And at the center, only God's will. The tribes on the outer edge had the most halakhic diversity, different customs, rhythms, and emphasis and expressions. But as you move inward, toward the Levites, towards the priests, towards the holy place, towards the Holy of Holies, halakhic became more unified, more precise, more exacting. Why? Because the proximity of God requires alignment with God. The closer you draw to the presence, the less room there is for personal preference. The more your life must harmonize with His will. This is not legalism, this is intimacy. This is why the Levites had stricter boundaries, and this is why the priests had even stricter boundaries. This is why the high priest had the strictest boundaries of all. Not because God is harsh, but because holiness is weighty. The camp of Israel was arranged like a great symphony, different instruments, different sections, different melodies, different rhythms, but at the center around one conductor, the Mishkan. The presence was at the center. God Himself was at the center. And when God is at the center, diversity becomes harmony, not chaos. The opposite of the world model. The world says unity requires sameness. Torah says unity requires God at the center. When God is at the center, Judah can be Judah, Dan can be Dan, Levi can be Levi, Issachar can be Issachar, and you can be you. And yet, all are one. This is the beauty of Bamidbar. This is the beauty of standards. This is the beauty of covenantal community. And so the standard teaches us who we are, where we belong, how we walk, and how our differences harmonize with God when God is at the center. Now that the tribes have been counted and arranged according to their standards, the Torah moves into the next layer of divine order, the arrangement around the camp, around the Mishkan. Once the tribes are counted and placed under their standard, the Torah moves to the next layer of divine order, the arrangement of the camp itself. This is not random. This is not political. This is not about hierarchy or favoritism. God is shaping a people who know where they stand and who stands with them and who stands at the center. The Torah says the children of Israel should camp, each man by his own standard. They shall camp around the tent of meeting at a distance. Numbers 2:2. Some have suggested that the tribal arrangement formed a shape of a cross. While that's a creative interpretation, the Torah itself does not describe the camp in geometrical terms. What we can say with confidence is that the layout mirrors ancient Near East royal encampments, especially the Persian model described by the Greek historian Xenophon, where the king dwelled in the center and the armies camped around him for protection. In Bamidbar, the pattern is transformative. Not a human king at the center, but the presence of God Himself. This is the first time in Scripture that Israel becomes a camp, not just a crowd. The people with structure, people with purpose, people arranged around the presence. And the placement of each tribe is intentional. To the east, in the direction of the sunrise, the directions of new beginning, who is camped there? Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Judah leads because Judah carries the mantle of kingship and praise. Jacob Blessing said, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah," Genesis 49:10. Judah goes first into battle. Judah goes first in worship. Judah goes first in movements. This is not a privilege. This is a responsibility. Issachar is known for the wisdom and Torah understanding, supporting Judah's leadership. Zebulun is known for generosity and provision. Sustaining the mission together, they form the front lines of Israel's journey. On the south side of the camp, Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. Reuben is the firstborn, the one who should have held leadership, but because of his instability in Genesis 49:4, the mantle is shifted to Judah. Yet God still honors Reuben's place. He is not erased. He is not diminished. He is positioned with dignity. This is a powerful reminder, even when we fail, God does not discard us. He reassigns us with purpose. Simeon and Gad flank Reuben, forming a strong southern presence, a reminder that God redeems and repurposes even the broken places of our story. On the west side of the camp is Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. This is the camp of Joseph's inheritance. Ephraim leads because Jacob has placed his right hand on Ephraim's head and saying, his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. Genesis 48:19. Ephraim represents fruitfulness, the very meaning of his name. Manasseh represents the healing of the past. God has made me forget my troubles. Benjamin represents the beloved identity, the son of my right hand. Together they form the western camp, the camp of restoration, blessing, and belovedness. On the north side of the camp is Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Dan is positioned on the north because the north is the direction from where danger often most comes in ancient Near East. Dan's name means judge. He is a tribe associated with protection, discernment, and justice. Asher brings blessing and abundance. Naphtali brings swiftness and freedom. Together they form the rear guard, the protection of Israel's flank. And at the very heart of the camp, not to the east, not to the west, not to the north, nor to the south, but at the center, the Mishkan, the presence, the dwelling place of God. This is the theological heart of Bamidbar. God is the center of identity. God is the center of belonging. God is the center of movement. God is the center of order. God is the center of unity. The tribes do not revolve around each other. They revolve around him. This is not control. This is care. This is not restriction. This is safety. This is not rigidity. This is purpose. When God is at the center, movement has direction. Identity has clarity. Diversity has harmony. Calling has alignment, and community has peace. This is the message of the camp's arrangement. Order before movement, presence before progress, God before everything else. Now that the tribes have been arranged around the presence, the Torah moves to the next layer of holiness. The Levites, after arranging the tribes around the Mishkan, the Torah turns to the tribe that does not receive land, does not camp under its own tribal banner. The Levites, their calling is different, and so their census is different. The Torah says, only of the tribe of Levi you shall not number. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings. Numbers 1:49 through 50. This is the first sign that Levites stands in category of their own. Their identity is not tied to the land. Their inheritance is not tied to territory. Their purpose is not tied to war. Their inheritance is God himself. Their calling is service. Their role is protection. And because their calling is different, the Torah counts them differently. When the rest of Israel was counted from 20 years up and the age of military readiness, the Levites were counted from 1 month old. Why? Because their calling is not about strength. It's not about a battle. It's not about physical readiness. Their calling is inheritance, service, and holiness. A Levite is born with a sacred task. From infancy, he belongs to God's service. This is why the census begins at 1 month, because their identity begins at birth. The Mishkan gives us the developmental arc of the priest and the Levitical life, 25 beginning training, 30 beginning full service, and 50 retiring from hard labor. At 25, and this is not random, this is formation. At 25, a young priest begins learning the rhythm of holiness, how to carry the vessels, how to guard the sacred, how to approach the presence. At 30, he fully steps into his calling, not because he is strong, but because he is formed. And at 50, he steps back from physical labor, not because he is unworthy, but because holiness is weighty, and the body has its limits. This is divine compassion woven into a divine calling. One of the most stunning lines in the entire portion appears in Numbers 4:18 through 20. Do not let the tribe of the Kohathites be cut off, so that they may live and not die when they approach the most holy things. This is shocking. God is not warning Israel about the Kohathites. God is warning Israel for the Kohathites. The Kohathites carry the holiest objects, the ark, the table of showbread, the menorah, the altars, and the sacred vessels. But they were not allowed to see them uncovered. They were not allowed to touch them directly. They were not allowed to approach them casually. Holiness is beautiful, but holiness is dangerous. Not because God is cruel, but because the sacred because sacred is weighty. This is why the priest must cover the holy objects before the Kohathites can carry them. This is why the community must protect those who serve closest to the sacred. This is why the Torah says, protect the Kohathites, not from enemies, not from danger, but from the holiness that they are called to carry. The community must protect those who serve closest to the sacred. This is one of the most overlooked truths in Torah. Those who serve closest to the presence are the most vulnerable, not spiritually weak, but spiritually exposed. The priest and the Levites stand in a place where heaven touches earth. They carry the weight of the holy. They bear the responsibility of the sacred, and the community must protect them. This is why the Levites encircle the Mishkan, the tabernacle. This is why the priests cover the vessels. This is why the Kohathites are warned. This is why the census is different. This is why the boundaries are strict. Holiness is not casual. Holiness is not common. Holiness is not safe. Holiness is life-giving, but it must be approached with reverence. And here's where the Torah narrative brilliance shines. Korah, the leader of the rebellion in Numbers 16, is a Kohathite. His very family commanded to handle the holy objects. He is from the tribe that is warned about danger of holiness. He is from the group that God explicitly says must be protected. But Korah's downfall is his ambition without submission, calling without humility, proximity without reverence. Korah wanted the priesthood without the boundaries of the priesthood. He wanted the honor without the holiness. He wanted the position without the posture. The ground swallowed him, not because God is harsh, but because holiness cannot be handled casually. Korah is the living example of what happens when somebody approaches the sacred without the fear of the Lord. So the Levites can teach us, calling is weighty, holiness is dangerous, service requires protection, proximity requires humility, ambition must bow to submission. And that the Torah shows us the weight of the calling and the danger of holiness through the Levites. It shifts our attention to something surprising, numbering themselves, the census at the beginning, and as our attention shifts to something surprisingly, the numbering itself, the census at the beginning and the census at the end of Bamidbar becomes a mirror, revealing the spiritual health of each tribe across the wilderness journey. And the book of Bamidbar begins with a census and ends with another. Two snapshots of the same people, taken 40 years apart. At first glance, these numbers look like statistics, but the Torah numbers are never just numbers. They are spiritual indicators, the sign of health or sickness, faithfulness or rebellion, blessing or decline. The census at the beginning of Bamidbar records 603,550 men of military age, Numbers 1:46. The census at the end of Bamidbar records 601,730 men of military age, Numbers 26:51. A slight decline, but the real story is in the tribal breakdown. Some tribes grow, some tribes shrink. Some tribes exploded in number, some tribes nearly disappeared. And the Torah invites us to ask why. Because the numbers reveal the spiritual condition of each tribe across the wilderness journey. Some of the tribes that grew, certain tribes showed remarkable growth between the first and second census. For example, Manasseh grew dramatically, Benjamin increased, Asher grew, and Issachar grew. The tribes became symbols of spiritual vitality, faithfulness, stability, and blessing. Growth in the Torah is never merely biological, it's covenantal. The growth reflects a tribe and walking in obedience, a tribe maintaining unity, a tribe resisting rebellion, a tribe staying aligned with God's purpose. Growth is a sign of spiritual health. Some tribes shrank, showing signs of spiritual decline. Other tribes experienced a dramatic decline. Most notably, Reuben declined, Simeon nearly collapsed, and Gad decreases. Why? Because these tribes are directly connected with moments of rebellion, instability, or moral failing. Reuben's instability, Genesis 49:4, continues through the wilderness. His tribe reflects the character of its ancestors. Simeon, the tribe of Simeon, is devastated after the sin of Baal Peor, Numbers 25. Many scholars believe that Simeon suffered the greatest loss in that judgment. Gad's decline is tied to internal disunity and border tension. Decline in the Torah is never merely demographic, it's spiritual. Decline reflects compromise, rebellion, division, idolatry, and moral collapse. Decline is a sign of spiritual sickness. The numbers become a metaphor of spiritual health. The census is not just a record, it's a mirror. It shows us that spiritual vitality, growth remains faithfulness. Excuse me. Growth reflects faithfulness, unity, and obedience. Spiritual decline reflects rebellion, compromise, and moral collapse. The consequences of rebellion, the tribes connected to Korah, Baal-peor, and other rebellions suffer the greatest loss. Blessing and the decline within community life. The census reveals spiritual choices that have communal consequences. No tribe lives unto itself. No tribe sins unto itself. No tribe thrives unto itself. The health of the community is tied to the health of the tribes, and the health of the tribes is tied to the health of their heart. The census at the end of Bamidbar is both a warning. Rebellion leads to decline. Compromise leads to loss. Disunity leads to collapse. But also a promise. Faithfulness leads to growth. Obedience leads to a blessing. Unity leads to strength. Census is not just about the numbers. It's about the spiritual trajectory. It asks us, are we growing or are we shrinking? Are we becoming more faithful or more fragile? Are we working in unity or drifting into division? Are we aligning with God's purpose or resisting them? The census is a spiritual diagnostic tool, a way of asking, what is the condition of our soul? Now that we have seen the numbers revealed in the spiritual health of Israel, the Torah moves to the next movement, the arrangement of duties, responsibility, and how each tribe and each family contributes to the life of the nation. Bamidbar is not just Israel's story, it's our own story. It's the story of every community God forms, every soul God shapes, every people God leads through the wilderness into purpose. Everything we've seen, the census, the standard, the camp arrangement, the Levites, the numbers, and all of it points to one truth. God forms a people before he moves a people, and that formation still happens today. Just as each tribe camped under its own standard, each of us carry a God-given identity, not someone else's calling, not someone else's gift, not someone else's halakha, not someone else's story. Your standard is a banner of God, of who God had made you to be. Some carry the standard of leadership, while some carry the standard of service. Some of us carry the standard of prayer. Some of us carry the standard of generosity. And some of us carry the standard of teaching, encouragement, or hospitality. Your standard is not a burden, it's a blessing. In Bamidbar, no one wanders around trying to figure out who they belong to. No one's camped alone. No one is left out. Everyone has a place. Everyone had a people. Everyone had a role. And the same is true today. You have a place in this camp. You have a community. You have a role that matters. You have a position that protects others and is protected by others. Belonging is not optional in the kingdom. It's essential. Just as every tribe has a role in the camp of Israel, every believer has a role in the body of Messiah. Paul tells us that we are one body with many members, different gifts, different functions, but with the same purpose. Some are hands, some are feet, some are eyes, and some are ears. And just like Bamidbar, the body only flourishes when every part serves. This is why volunteering matters. It's not just filling a slot, it's stepping into your calling, carrying your standard, and strengthening the community that God has placed you within. When you serve, you're not just doing a task. You're taking your place in the camp. We each have a wilderness where God forms us. The wilderness is not punishment, it's preparation. Every believer walks through a wilderness season. Seasons of transition, uncertainty, identity formation, and stripping away, of waiting and learning to trust. The wilderness is where God clarifies identity, establishes order, and reveals a calling, and prepares us to be fruitfulness. Just as the tribes protect one another and the Levites protect the sacred, and the Kohathites were protected by the community, we are called to protect one another, to guard each other's hearts, to carry each other's burdens, to stand and watch over each other's souls, to honor each other's calling, to shield those who serve closest to the sacred. No one walks alone. No one carries the holy alone. No one faces the wilderness alone. Community is God's design for survival and flourishing. As we draw closer to God by aligning our halakha, our lives, and our hearts with his will, the closer the tribes drew closer to the Mishkan, the more their halakha converged, the more their lives aligned, the more their differences harmonized, the more their hearts were shaped by God's presence. But because God is at the center, it brings order, peace, and purpose, and full fruitfulness. And so Bamidbar calls us to embrace our identity, stand under our own standards, to take our place within the camp, to walk through the wilderness, protect our tribe, draw closer to God, align our lives with his will. This leads us into the final movements of the calling, a call to fruitfulness after formation, the blessing that comes when God is at the center of our lives. As we come to the end of Bamidbar's opening movements, we return to the image we carried throughout this journey: the wilderness, the fig tree, the standards, the camps, the Levites, and the census. Each one has spoken something essential about God, who God is and who we are becoming. We now gather together into one final call: become a people who draws near. Yeshua's fig tree parable in Matthew 24 is not about judgment, it's about seasons. When the branch becomes tender and puts forth leaves, you know that the summer is near. The tender branch comes first, the fruit comes later, the leaves come next. Fruitfulness is not instant. Fruitfulness is not forced. Fruitfulness is not manufactured. Fruitfulness is a natural result of formation. And Bamidbar teaches that the formation happens in the wilderness, in the season where God strips away old, clarifying identities and establishes order, revealing calling, and prepares us for what comes next. The wilderness is not punishment, it's an invitation. It is a place where God speaks tenderly, a place where God forms identity, a place where he reveals calling, a place where God prepares us for fruitfulness. The wilderness is where God meets us, not when we are strong, but when we are surrendered. But Bamidbar reminds us that God does his deepest work in the quietest place. Each man under his own standard. This is one of the most beautiful lines in Torah. This means you have a place, you have a people, you have a calling, you have a role, you have identity rooted in God. Your standard is not a burden, it's a banner of belonging. When every tribe stands under its standard, every family stands in its place, and every person stands in their calling. The camp becomes a picture of heaven on earth. Everything in Bamidbar moves us towards one center, the Mishkan, the presence, the Holy One. In the midst of his people, the closer the tribes grew to the center, the more their wills aligned, the more their lives harmonized, the more their hearts became shaped by God's will. This is the calling of Bamidbar. Draw near, align your life, center your heart, let God be in the middle of everything. Not out of fear, not out of pressure, not out of obligation, but because God is at the center. It brings order, peace, purpose, and fruitfulness. May we become a people who know our place, who stand under our own standard, who walk through our wilderness with faith, who protects one another with love, and who draws near to the Holy One with reverence and joy. May the God who formed Israel in the wilderness form us in our own wilderness. May the God who arranged the camp arrange our lives around his presence. And may the God who calls the Levites call us deeper into holiness. And may we live like the fig tree, bearing fruit in its season, the fruit that comes after formation, the fruit that blesses others, fruit that brings joy, brings glory to the one who dwells in our midst. Shalom, Shabbat.